is another beautiful episode of Fresh Perspective. Episode 5, we are talking about motherhood. We're in the month of May. My name's Amanda Thomas, for some of you who may not know who I am. I have two lovely, amazing, warm, joyful people who have joined the Fresh Perspective. I have Mimi over here.
Hello.
She is the executive assistant to the DEI office. She holds down the fort for her and everybody. What?
Yeah, it's true. Hello, everybody.
And then we have the wonderful and amazing Rebeca.
Hello, hello.
They're a little nervous, guys. This is
Yeah,
their
we
first
are.
episode, but that's all right. I choose these two amazing women because they have amazing expertise lens when we're talking about motherhood. They bring their own different, unique perspective. And so I kind of want to get started of talking about, like, how are you guys raised and how has it influenced the way you raise your children?
Well, I was raised in a very conservative Christian household. Yeah, and I had to unlearn a lot of things. Not that the way I was raised was bad. It's just what my parents knew, and that's how, they raised us. Um, and well, in a very conservative Christian West Indian household, that's a whole nother story. But that the way I was raised was very, I guess, what some people would consider proper. How to conduct myself properly and be godly, and I felt terrible if I made a mistake, and or you're going straight to hell, or all kinds of things like that. So there's a lot of fear of wrongdoing, I guess, when I was growing up, and I didn't want to project that fear because I'm still afraid of some things. Like, there's some things that just stay with you, when you grow up, and then so I didn't want to raise my kids in fear.
Was it like growing up legalistic Christianity where everything was a sin?
Everything was a sin.
Wearing pants were a sin. Disney was a sin. Going to the movies were a sin.
Everything was a sin. So if you said a bad word, or if you wore a skirt above your knees, well, for the girls, a lot of the sins were, I felt, very gender specific, meaning, girls always had all the sins. Like, if you wear a skirt above your knees, you're making the boys look at you, and that's a sin.
You mean a Jezebel?
A Jezebel.
What they call them.
Yes, exactly that. So I had no lipstick, so I couldn't wear makeup. And I couldn't shave my legs. Things like that. It was very, well, in West Indian culture, not many women shave their legs anyway. It was just the way, that's just the way it was, and nobody really cared. It's not until you come to the US or whatever where everybody's, doing that, because
Plucking, waxing,
all that stuff, shaving your mustache, everything. But I was a tomboy, so wearing pants wasn't a sin. You just couldn't wear pants to church, because that was a cardinal sin. You couldn't do that. So you couldn't drink alcohol, so things like that. It was a lot of do's and don'ts. So I grew up with a lot of do's and don'ts, and I didn't view like God as a loving God. At the time I viewed God as like, there's a lightning bolt I'm going to throw at you for doing whatever, and so yeah, as I grew up, and I said to myself, if I ever have children, I don't want to have them grow up in fear, legalistic, fundamental fear. Because, you want to show them a different way. Yeah. You want to still set a foundation and set an example, but I didn't want them growing up in fear.
Yeah. I can definitely resonate with that lived experience because my parents are Salvadorian, so first generation, immigrating to Canada. And we also had a very religious aspect to that as well. My dad is a pastor, so I grew up with the rules, with the unhealthy guilt. I think that there is healthy
Oh, that's a good
guilt,
way to say it.
right? I think
Yeah.
there's healthy guilt. And so one of my takeaways, I love the foundation that my parents have given me, right? Because I have my faith that I rely on when
Mhm.
I have challenging moments. And so with my children, especially when we think about just the Latino community, when we don't talk about mental health or emotional well-being or emotional intelligence, and sometimes um, they over spiritualize everything
That's
because
true.
that's all they know. So
Mhm.
the take that I've kind of done with my children is like, how do I combine both
Yeah.
worlds where my children are emotionally intelligent, have the language and the vocabulary to be able to do things, install healthy guilt where they know it's wrong, but it's more of an intrinsic motivation
Mhm.
and not so much because I'm going to get in trouble. Because when you do, you push the limits and
Mhm.
you push the boundaries and you're just like, well, can I get away with that? And then I won't get caught.
True.
And so I think I love the foundation that my parents have raised us. And then the added thing of being Salvadorian and just the very machista culture when it comes in the Latino community, where there is very defined gender roles
Ah.
with male and with females. And I remember the first time that I saw something different because growing up in the church and we were refugees, and in Canada, most of the communities were either Salvadorian or Chilean
Mhm.
in the 80s because they were also escaping the war in Chile at the time. And that was my family, was my church family. So I always saw the very traditional roles. The first time I saw something different, I was 16 and I had
Oh
gone
my
to my sister's
goodness.
house and she's married to a Black man. And I remember he came and offered us ice cream and went and got it for us. And I was like,
What's
you guys
happening?
do this? Men do this?
Oh my gosh.
And then I knew I wanted different. I
Oh.
knew that I wanted different for myself in that moment. Not to say that there was anything wrong with my culture and what I had been raised in that
Mhm.
very traditional, conservative way, but I wanted different for myself and I wanted different for my kids. So you best believe my son he
There you
washes
go.
dishes.
He said, Rebecca's household, you
He
wash up
washed the
some
dishes.
We
dishes.
sure do.
Yeah,
We
that's
do this
She's
as
an
a team.
equal
yep.
opportunist.
Everybody's gonna do it. That's because my mother is, well, she was, God rest her soul. She's Jamaican. It's 100% Jamaican, born and raised. And my dad, um, he was born in Guyana, and he grew up in Trinidad and Barbados and St. Lucia, those little Southern Caribbean islands. And it was not like that growing up. My mother, like every woman in my family, was a firecracker. Like my aunts, my grandmothers, my aunts, my mom, no joke, especially the Jamaican side. You know, where my dad's my dad was and his family were calm as the sea at sunset. Just, you know, very calm. So my mom was the one who was the disciplinarian, you know? And she would be the one who's yelling at you and telling you to sit your butt down and, go do this or go do that in straight Jamaican patois. So it wasn't gender specific like your culture. Like
Yeah.
you saw like my dad would bring my mother tea. So those were things that I was used to,
Oh, wow.
but my mom would still do stuff, but she was a firecracker. She was no joke. And she kept us all in line, especially me and my older sister. My dad kept my brothers in line more so, but my mom, um, yeah, she instilled in us these characteristics. You just don't step out of line, because she'll knuckle you in the head or something, or do something because you're just not acting right. And it was more reputation for a West Indian family. So if you messed up, it reflects poorly on the family. Like, oh, your mother didn't do right,
Absolutely.
you know? That's how it was with us. So it's interesting to hear the other side of that. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you wanted something different because you saw your brother-in-law, was it,
Yeah.
bring ice cream to you? And you're like, whoa,
I was like, this new.
yeah. Whereas if I didn't wash the dishes, my mother would wake us up at like 12:30 in the morning she'll just strip off the blankets. Get up and go wash the dishes. You're like, oh, you're crying. And she did not joke around. But, the faith part, like my faith means a lot to me, the way I was raised. Now that I'm older and have to look at God or faith in a different way than fear, it means so much to me now. It keeps me grounded and sane,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah. And I try to do that in my household, but I
Mhm.
don't want my kid, I'm not Bible thumping in my house either. And I say that in the way where I want them to have a genuine relationship with their faith, and not be just afraid of what other people are going to say. Back to what you were saying, that is so common in the Latino culture. What are the people going to say? ¿Qué va a decir la gente? I've heard that so much. Like, what are the people going to say? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I don't care what the people are going to say. Can I just live my life?
Yeah.
But there is this image. And I think sometimes that's why we don't talk about topics within our communities, because of the image that we're trying to portray, that everything is perfect. I'm okay with things not being perfect in my household, and choosing to live authentically in front of my kids,
Yeah.
right? Because then it gives them permission to be authentic
Right.
and be transparent. I mean, of course, knowing with who, not to go do it with the whole entire world, because the world can be very mean, right?
Oh, yeah.
But
Yep.
how do we provide that safe household so that they know that they don't always have to operate from a place of perfection, but
Mhm.
just operate from a place of excellence and be true to who you are?
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I think they have to see us make mistakes and us
absolutely.
not be this perfect pigeon perched somewhere.
Yeah.
They have to hear us apologize
Yep.
and, say, I'm sorry, or there is a different way. And I think we have to model the authenticity for them, so they'll know that, hey, perfection isn't required. Doing your best, sure, absolutely. But, along the way, you're going to make mistakes. And I think we have to, um, at least from what I learned, um, don't instill the fear in making a mistake, but just saying, hey, we can get past this, and then give them that direction.
Absolutely. Giving them that growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and being okay with failure. And I tell, especially my son right now, because sometimes I think that he's afraid of making mistakes, and I'm just like, we're gonna choose to fail forward. That's where the most growth
Yeah.
happens. That's in those moments. That's where we grow. Because if everything's perfect, we don't learn,
Right.
right? And so
Yep.
it's just like, okay, so what are we gonna do different? Where are we gonna redirect our behaviors, our mindset? What is the narrative that we're feeding our head, like our minds, in choosing to do better the next time?
Yeah, that's true. So how old are your kids?
My kids are 8 and 11.
Okay.
So my 11-year-old son, Jaden, and then Olivia,
Oh,
my firecracker.
she's the firecracker.
She is the
She
firecracker.
is.
Oh my goodness.
And I love it too.
Oh
Oh my
my, yeah. She keeps me on my toes for sure.
I
How about
bet.
you?
I have 2 boys, well, young men, and they are my son Caleb, he is 20, and my son Joshua, he is 18, soon to be 19.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're
I'm gonna come to you for advice, Mimi.
oh my word, with these
I'm about to
boys.
go into the rough season.
Okay,
Yeah.
you can't see Mimi's
No,
face,
you
but,
can't see
but let me
my
tell you, that face is only a face a mama
I
could
know
give.
my face.
It's a
speaks loud.
side eye, astonished. Are you sure you want to go to me?
Yeah,
And
I
I've
don't
been through the
know.
valley of the shadow of death. They taking me
Mercy,
there.
you're not lying.
She said, I need coverage
That is so
over me. That's what
funny.
she's
Woo.
saying with her eyes. I know y'all
It's
can't
true.
see it.
No, you have to. It's different from when I was growing up, because these kids now have access to everything, easy access to everything, information, technology, whatever they want, they can
Mhm.
get their hands on. Whereas that wasn't available,
No.
when I was their age. We had to go search for things and intentionally search for things. They don't
Mhm.
have to intentionally do anything. They can just get it. It's there,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think we have to give them guidance on that too. I know I've told my boys, um, I still call them boys. They're always going to be my
They
boys,
always will be.
Those are your babies. You can
They
call them
are my
whatever you want to
babies. I
call
know.
them.
I still do. And I
Yeah.
always will. But I think most of it with motherhood, I think motherhood is showing the compassionate side of God,
Oh,
I
so
believe.
good.
And, the heart of God. And I'm not saying, um, yeah, I think that is what he put in us, to care and put our wings around our children. Not that fathers can't do that either,
Hmm.
but there's something about, a mother's love. Like I would do anything
Absolutely.
I will step in front of a bullet, a car, whatever to save my children,
Hmm.
you know?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's just something we were given,
Hmm.
It's a
that we were
nature thing,
created with.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hear mama bear, right?
Yes.
Don't mess with your cub, but that's a mama bear right there,
Very true.
right? It's very protector, nurture, loving.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, that's how you learn those things. A lot
Yeah.
of times it's your mom setting those examples,
Yeah.
right? And so what I'm hearing, Mimi, is like that protective is just an instinct in you as natural.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yep.
That I'm here to love on my child, to
Yeah.
also protect my child.
Right.
I know I'm in my 30s, and if I had to call my mama, she would be ready, strapped, and ready for a fight. Don't mess with her babies.
Yep.
She
Yeah.
don't care.
It's true.
She's ready for war no matter what. Now, if you did wrong, she gonna talk about you for a
Oh,
second
yeah.
because
Yep.
she's there. But then she said, pull aside and say, I'm still gonna
You
fight
want
this
it.
battle,
Yep.
but I'm gonna side eye you and put you in timeout
That's
and
true.
scold you still.
Yeah.
It's
But I'm
true.
here at the front line of that,
Yeah.
protector of
It's
that
true.
heart.
Yeah.
My boys would say, like, something went down at school or something. I said, well, I'm gonna come down there. Like, Mom, please don't come down to the school because you just gonna get mad at folk. I'm like, absolutely, I'm gonna get mad. Mom, please. They would beg me not to come down there. And I did that once, and I had to light somebody up for picking on my child. I do not do bullying.
Yeah. No.
I tell my boys, if you ever bully somebody, we're gonna have some serious problems, because that's not how you treat people.
No. Yeah.
So I've been down to their schools before and had to have some words with some folks. So yes, it is a natural instinct.
Absolutely. Yeah. You gotta fight for your babies, and in that also is just the amount of strength you don't even realize you have until you have them, and you're just like, I had that in me.
Yeah.
Like that fight is in me.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
and just even and how you do like everyday life, right? And that's one of the takeaways that I look at my mom. My mom, we were her motivation for everything, right? And I look at my babies now, and I say babies,
Yeah.
even though they're not, right? But I look at my babies,
They still your babies.
That's
right?
true. They just say your babies.
I look at my babies, and they're my reason why for even just going and giving me the strength to do things.
Yeah.
My mom immigrated to Canada when I was 2. My brother was 1, and she was pregnant with my sister. Did not speak
Wow.
English and delivered my sister in Edmonton, Alberta, in the in the
Wow.
beginning of January.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know if you're familiar of the weather in Alberta
cold.
and in the prairies.
Mhm. Nothing out there.
And then had to do that on her own with no family, nobody around, not speaking the language, in a basement almost apartment building, like on the first floor. Can drive, didn't have a job, had the 3 kids, right? 3 kids under 2.5. Like I had my babies and I spoke the language. I had a job, I could drive, and I still lost it sometimes. But when I think about those moments, right? And I think about her strength, and you don't think about it until you become a mother yourself, right? The sacrifices that they've made. And you realize, wow, they did it. My grandmother did it. My grandmother was pulled out of school when she was 6 years old in El Salvador and was forced to work in the market
Oh wow.
and cater to her family. So she was illiterate. And when she got to a certain age, she had multiple pregnancies that not go through, and then she had multiple babies you know, in like in El Salvador, they don't make it even past a year old.
Mm.
And she worked in the market and raised 5 kids on her own.
Wow.
And I remember doing a class about women in your family and women in society. And I think about my grandmother, I think about my mother, and I think about me now, right? And I think about my daughter
Mm-hmm.
and the example and the lineage that she comes from and the
Mm-hmm.
resiliency and the strength, right? It
Yes.
all looks so
Yes.
different,
Yeah,
right? But you just don't know you have it in you
that's
until
true.
you know, you have those kiddos and you're just like, oh man.
Yeah.
They keep me going.
They
Absolutely.
keep you going and they also keep you humble,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I remember one time, just watching my grandmother and then watching my mother interact with her mother, you know, was interesting because the way my mom would just, who's a firecracker, would tiptoe around my grandmother. I was like, whoa, that's my mom? Like she would light into us like nothing. And then my grandmother would come around and then she'd just be so calm. And watching my sister, both my grandmothers, my dad's mother was a pastor's wife, you know,
Mm.
so she had a different demeanor, but she was a very strong woman. She had 8 kids, you
Oh
know,
my.
um, which I thought was wow, that's not happening to me. Uh, you know, hey,
That wasn't your calling, Mimi.
That
no,
was
no,
She wasn't
no,
called into that
absolutely
ministry.
not. But she did it. And then watching my aunt, my dad's sister, Aunt Leola, she was the oldest of 8 children, but she's the only girl and the oldest of 7 boys.
Your mom?
My dad's sister, my
your
aunt
dad's sister.
Leola,
Okay.
one of the father
Ooh,
firecrackers.
don't mess with her.
No. And then what I admired about her, I think it was at the age of 30, she went to medical school and became a doctor, an OB-GYN doctor. And she delivered so many babies in Trinidad,
Wow.
all over that little island. And she is still going. And I respect and admire her so much. And my paternal grandmother, you know. Um, and my mom, she and my sister has gone through some things. And like you said about the strength and resiliency, my mother may not have been in the market, but growing up in Jamaica, raising 3 brothers, she had 3 little brothers that she took care of when my grandmother left to come to America, you know, and just hearing her story. She was a seamstress. My grandmother was a seamstress,
Wow.
so I got to see her sew from hand, not with the machine, but she later did the machine. My mother got the gift of sewing, but I didn't get the gift of sewing. I didn't get that gift, but I do other things. Like she made me learn how to crochet and knit, and I didn't like
yeah.
knitting and I didn't want to crochet, but I do it now. So, like you said, they gave us a lot of, the strength, the resiliency. Even though our challenges now may not have been what they had to deal
Yeah.
with, my parents immigrated to the US as well from the Caribbean and had different experiences,
Yeah.
leaving there to come to a very race tense country back in the mid 60s, late 60s, it was crazy to hear their
Wow.
stories. So I respect their journey,
Yeah, absolutely.
and for me being here, and for being, I'm not far from perfect, but just for taking what they have taught me,
Yeah.
and having my own strength, finding it actually,
Yeah.
because I didn't always have it, but finding it, especially when I had children, especially when I had boys, because I had to talk to God. I said, if I ever have a girl, she is not going to be raised the way I was, and no, certain things will just have to, because my brothers got to do not whatever they wanted, but they had a lot more freedom than I had.
Oh, I can relate with that.
Yeah, I bet. And I said, I'm not going to have, if I have a girl, she's not going to be raised in a double standard.
Absolutely.
At all.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of that. So, yeah, God knew what he was doing when he gave me boys. Is it easy? No. is it wonderful to have them hug you all the time, even when they're,
Aw.
20 and 18 and crusty sometimes?
There's something
Yeah.
about boys and their mamas.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can say that. My brother is a mama's
See, look at that.
mama, okay, and he's in his mid-30s. That's his mama. Don't mess with his
That's
mama no
true.
matter what.
It's true. My oldest brother was my mother's favorite. He'll deny it up to this day, but it's true. It's true. Yeah, my boys, especially, I think it hit me the most when my mother, I think I call it the true mother bear, came out when was it Trayvon Martin or Tamir Rice was shot or killed around then, because my boys were around the same age.
Oh, wow.
And that just pierced my heart and shattered it in a million pieces,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh my goodness, that could have been one of my boys.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
conversations in the house started to change about, you're not taking water guns outside anymore to go play with. You're not, and a lot of the knots came in. You're not. And then we had to explain why.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's just like,
And that's the thing, being a mom in this climate, and just having to a mom of children of color
Mhm.
and navigating those situations.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm trying not to have my kids live in fear, but to live in wisdom,
yeah.
right? And to know the reality and the truth. But it's challenging because you
Mhm.
want to keep them kind of naive in their own little world and preserve their innocence. And
Right.
you're like, okay,
Mhm.
let's hold this off a little bit. But even with your intentions of doing that, it still happens at school,
Yep.
right? I had my son in 5th grade be called the N-word out at
Oh
recess.
boy.
Oh,
I'd
man.
have been down at the school.
I was.
You were good.
I definitely were. I
Wait a minute.
was.
Mimi's feet is tapping right now. She looked like she ready.
Yeah, I'm
She
like, I
it
should've-
didn't like she was like, "Where do I
should've
meet you,
called-
Rebecca?" Because I would have been
should've
right
called Mimi
there.
out. I'm like, girl,
was-
I need to come now.
It would have been just me. You would have had a whole crew with you.
Right? I've been like, come on, where's my tribe at? Let's do this, right? Where's my village? Yeah, it's really, that's the really challenging part.
Mhm.
I do have to say, though, I am kind of impressed with some of the school systems right now and what they're trying to do and calling it out. My daughter, a little boy called her milk chocolate. And my daughter knew that was not okay. Even though he might have, and people are like, that's innocent. I think 10 years ago, I never would have gotten a phone call from the teacher and the vice principal. And they called me and they
Wow.
said, this is not okay. We called the little boy's parents, and I appreciated that, because I'm like, there's hope.
Mhm.
There's hope. That brought me hope at that moment, right? That things are changing. I'm hoping, that
Yeah,
things
you
are
hope.
changing. The hope is slow. The change is slow.
Yeah.
But it helps me think that my kids might have a better future,
Mhm.
right? And even just talking of like the immigrant experience and coming to this country and having to deal with not only becoming an immigrant here, but also being a person of color here. Some people don't even realize that's a thing until they get here,
That's true.
right?
That is so true.
And so,
Woo.
hopefully things are changing little by little.
Well.
Or else I'm gonna show up with Mimi at the
Yeah.
school.
And a crew. You'd have a whole
And
crew
a
of mamas
crew.
behind you. Like, nope,
Let's do this.
we're not gonna tolerate
We
that.
stay ready.
Yeah, you have to stay ready.
Absolutely.
You have to, because if one of my boys were to call me right now and say, "Mom, somebody said what," I'd be up in the car, drive to where I got to go to meet them there, and we're gonna figure it out right now.
Yeah.
Not tolerating it. And we did have to have the conversation, and I don't know if you've had it yet with your children of color. But, the conversation about how to conduct yourself, because my boys, my oldest one drives.
Mhm.
The younger one, he don't want to drive yet,
Mhm.
because I really did believe when we had the talk about being a young Black boy and young Black man in America, you're looked at different.
Yeah.
Like, when do I think you may have seen I saw it on Facebook, the little flyer was like a little baby boy, Black baby boy, and it says, "When do I stop being cute?" And it's like 3 pictures. One, he's a baby. One, he's a little
Yes, I saw
kid.
that. Mhm.
And then an adult. When do I stop being cute? When do I
Ugh.
become a threat? I think it's something like that.
Mhm.
And I had to show it to my boys, and I'm like, you're cute when you're born, when you're little. But then like Tamir Rice and like Trayvon Martin and all these other young black men, Michael Brown, when do you start becoming a threat? When does it start changing? And I was terrified. I kid you not. That scared me to death. I don't want you to get pulled over. You're walking down the street, you're riding your bike, you're with your friends. I had to tell them, you must pay attention to your surroundings, look out for the cops, and, don't say anything, call us, whatever. So we gave them cell phones at that point, because we wanted to have access. And if you in emergency, you need to call us, let us know where you are. We started it, where are you going, who, what, when, where, how, and why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I literally made a sign and I put it on the fridge. Who you going with? Where you going?
Yep.
Why you're going? When are you going? When do you come back? What's happening there? How you getting there? How you coming? All of those things became a norm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say add, do I have their phone number?
Because
that was another thing in my household. Do I have their contact information? I am 30 years old. My mama is asking for my employees' contact information or my colleagues' friends. Like, what's their number, Amanda, just in case I can't get a hold of it. It's a safety
It is.
thing.
Absolutely.
And I think you bring it back of like that fear both of you have for your children. It's a different layer. So it's not just a layer of like immigration of just like coming from this country, limited of English. Now you're a person of color that people are now saying that there's a history with it that you never knew about and had to learn very quickly these notes. And then how do you educate your children at the same time of this new culture that has arrived in them, where some people have had longer histories, right? To understand and grasp and prepare their children a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right? Like in my household, I was always taught it, you're Black in America. And my mom and dad did a really good thing of like that fine line. Like, Mimi, you went to fear mode protective, right? I'm going to take it to extreme because I need to keep you alive. And I think my mom and dad did a really good job at that middle ground. And I think that helped because they were born and raised here, right? This was their culture, so they understood how to navigate it differently. So when I grew up, I wasn't afraid. As you mentioned, Rebecca, like aware.
Yes, aware.
I'm aware of what's going on. I'm not afraid of you. I'm aware. And I know what to do in a crisis situation. So
Preparing
I don't look
our kids,
at them, right? And so that balance, it's really hard to do, especially if culturally this is a new culture for you too, to understand and that you're unpacking.
Yeah.
I think the fear and the concern was in me, when those incidents happen. And I think for me, I need to make them scared first. And then now let's, freak them out. And then now that I have your attention, let's figure out how we are going to navigate this. And here's where we're going to have to start. Because you are two young Black boys in America, this is what your world could look like. Because not all Black men or Black children or people are targeted, but you could be a target.
Absolutely. And I have a situation that just happened recently with my son, and just having that added layer as a parent, right? That when they do so my son did something at school where he took a video of some kids because I think they were kissing in the hallway. And my son was like, they're kissing in the hallway. And he goes and tells the teacher. And the teacher's like, well, I need evidence. Well, you don't tell an 11-year-old you need evidence. They're going to be like, okay, well, let me go ahead and just take a picture. Well, he got in trouble for filming them without their consent. So he told me, my son is very honest. He knows to tell the truth.
That's important.
Well, I hope so, right? And so I get a message from the vice principal saying he's going to get lunch detention, and here's the report. They made my son look like he was a peeping Tom.
No.
It was just the way that they put it in the narrative that they had put out. I was like, oh no, we're not going to do this. I go, my son is a son of color. He's a boy of color. And I'm just like, you are already implementing biases that whenever anybody looks at this report, they're automatically going to think something of him. And I called the principal, and then the other little boy that got in trouble with him was also Black.
I see.
And I was like, I cannot let this go, right? Like, we have to change this report because it's going in their file. And I was talking to the vice principal. And she was like, boys will be boys. They do things. They
Oh,
do whatever.
see?
She's like,
Oh my gosh.
my son did something similar. I go, your son is white.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are Black.
Mm-hmm.
And I know too much. And I know it might have seemed extreme to her a little bit. And I said, I know too much about the school to prison pipeline. I
Right.
go, it starts in little minuscule,
Yep.
in those micro
Yes.
moments at that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You automatically start criminalizing my child.
Yep. They get labeled.
I go, and I need more investigation.
Right.
Right. And they get labeled.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I brought that up that she was like, okay, let me go ahead and investigate a little bit more. And we got more people involved and they talked to the teacher. And I let my son, some of my friends were like, why did you let him serve the detention? I go, because you know what? He needs to learn that not everybody is out for good for him.
It's true.
That
That's
even
so
though you
true.
have somebody in authority telling you to do something, at
They're
the end
not
of the
all
day,
for
this was a
you.
white woman
Mm-hmm.
and you are a,
Young Black kid.
you're a Black kid.
Yep.
Right? And so I'm like, you're not going to sit there and just do whatever somebody tells you to do because you don't know what their intentions are, right?
It's true.
I'm not accusing that she had any malice in her to do it. But I know that teacher's going to think about it again, right? Like before she does it. But again, it's just that added layer of what we need to teach our kids, right? And I'm like, you're the one that's going to pay the consequence at the end of the day, right?
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I should have brought you two with me.
Shoot.
She be
I'd have been there.
ready. BB
I would've
is
been-
ready to
I
go.
was like,
She
what?
got tennis shoes on right now. She is ready
I'm right there with
to
you.
go. But the notion, right, of how it was written
Mm-hmm.
and labeled differently and like the situation at hand, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That you're like, yes, my kid was wrong for doing this. But the way you criminalize them
Yes.
automatically.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because we've heard in the news, what is it? That Brock Turner guy, for example, who, assaulted that woman. And then when they wrote the report about him, he was a, athlete, swimmer, stellar swimmer. He won this many, competitions. And I'm like, what the heck?
Yep.
And then he ended up, with 3 months in jail?
Mhm.
But then you have another kid of color, a young Black kid of color, and then here all of a sudden they get shot by the police because they're running the opposite direction. And the kid that fell into the pen with the gorilla, they criminalized his father.
Yeah.
Mhm.
His father has a back. What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And this is what happens with the labeling and the criminalizing, and it makes society look at, those people are a problem.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that is not the truth.
Yeah. Because the narrative is being manipulated
Yeah.
Yes.
to favor the dominant culture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which even adds to more why we need representation in every area
Absolutely.
of this world, in media, in healthcare, in education. We need representation, right? And so I hope my kids, I can pass the baton to them and be like, okay, now you go ahead and pick it up and do better for your kids and the next
Yeah.
generation, right? My grandmother was illiterate, didn't even have, first grade. My mom, she got to high school. And then, I've been blessed and fortunate to be able to get my master's. And I hope my daughter and my son can continue to educate themselves, continue to empower themselves, and continue to bring knowledge and awareness and create a change.
That is so very critically important. Representation is important, not just having race representation or ethnicity representation. They have to have that in addition to being genuine with their representation.
Absolutely.
And how are they sharing their information to be inclusive and to build up, our children when we send them to school? Well, who's there? Who's teaching them?
Yep.
What are you teaching them?
Yep.
How are you teaching it to them to empower them to be great citizens of our communities? Because not everybody is out for you just because you're of the same ethnic group. Not everybody has the same intention. That goes for everyone. And, I've told my boys, I try every moment I can. I sat down with them and I showed them the flags of our ancestors.
Yeah.
Here's where your grandparents were born. Here's where your parents were born. Here's where, your extended family.
Yeah.
Here's all of these flags.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, all of these mean something.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to know this is something you should be proud of. You have
Absolutely.
Guyanese flag, and you have a Jamaican flag, and you have a Trinidadian flag.
Yeah.
You have, a St. Lucian flag. You have all these, a Barbados flag.
Mhm.
You have all of this rich ancestry,
Yeah. Yeah.
and something to be proud of. And you were born in this country, and even though this country isn't always positive, you have freedom,
Yep.
and you need to use your freedom wisely and to navigate this world wisely, because not everybody is out to see you succeed.
Nope.
But you better believe I am.
Right? And they're not learning this in school.
Right.
It's our responsibility. And I
Yep.
think as a mother, I know I've taken that responsibility on my own, because I know that they're not necessarily learning about the Latino experience here in the United States and our Latino heroes, right? And I just recently purchased a book for my kids so that they can see what is the
Yep.
contribution that has
Yes. Nice.
happened, right?
Yep.
So that they can see we have made changes and we are powerful, we are intelligent, we can actually make a difference and a change, so that they're not believing what sometimes, again, the media is controlling the narrative as to what the Latino experience is in the States, right? The gardener, the maid,
Yeah.
the babysitter, like we need to start changing that narrative, right? And I definitely feel the burden and it means educating myself too.
Yes.
So the Latinx Caucus right now, we are reading a book called You Sound Like a White Girl, and it's about assimilation. And the author does a really good job talking about the lived experiences of Latinos here and the history and where everything comes out. I'm like, how come I've never heard this before? How come I'm like 40 years old right now and I'm learning this like today, right?
Yeah.
But I just love that we are getting more representation and there's more authors that are being motivated to have these conversations, to talk about the history, and we just continue to do that.
You have to thrive. And think about maybe even book publishers
Yeah.
in the past didn't want to take on those stories
Yep.
because they didn't fit the narrative of the majority society.
Exactly.
What am I going to gain from it? Well, why is it always just about you? There are
Right?
communities of other people here who are dying to hear these stories, to find that representation, and to say, well, they did it. I can do this as well,
Mhm.
especially the immigrant,
Mhm.
communities. And so, yeah, I've given my boys stuff about their Caribbean heritage, and even about some of the American heroes, the Black American heroes in this country, that they need to read their stories,
Absolutely.
and the people that we don't even hear about,
Yep. Yeah.
And one of the strong women from the Jamaican culture that I learned about was Nanny of the Maroons, and she fought the colonizers on that island, the Spaniards and then the British, when they came and took over the island. Nanny of the Maroons is on the currency in that country.
Wow.
And so a long history of powerful women,
Absolutely. Yes.
and then to give whatever I have
Mhm.
to my sons. So if they ever come to the point where they're looking for a partner in life, that they want to spend their lives with, well, what characteristics are you looking for? What have I modeled for them that they would cherish, is what kind of, I hope they got something.
Yes.
I think they did, Mimi. I think that they got a lot of wisdom and love from you. And I think they appreciate that. Sometimes they may not say it, Mimi. I will say it for them today, is that you have done
make
amazing
sure they
work.
listen to
They
this.
listen
I
to
hope
us.
so. Oh my
Right?
goodness.
And I
yeah.
think you both have brought two beautiful perspectives of your history, your rich history that you're trying to embed in how to raise your children and not to forget where you came from. You both talk about your lineage and how you were raised and how you formed to you being an amazing people that I sit in front of me, but also how you pass that baton, right, to your children and equip them for this world, that these tools and different gifts and talents that you guys have, that you are trying to restore and validate your children in different ways and different forms. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think motherhood as that we need more, right? And motherhood, when I'm also listening to you guys as we slowly close up, is that it's not have to be a biological mother. It can be an auntie.
True.
It can be a sister. It
Yes.
can be anybody showing up. I mean, you mentioned your sister, I mean, your grandmother raising her brothers and siblings. So it could be anybody showing up as a protector and pouring in. And I love that you both are still challenging yourself to learn more about the history that it's not taught in school
Right.
and how to improve yourself in different skills and
Mhm.
keep pouring into people in the way that they need to do. I think that's a beautiful thing that you both, display every day that I
Mm.
see. I call on both of you.
Mm.
And yes, Auntie Mimi, I do call her Auntie Mimi.
I accept it.
And she accepts me calling her Auntie Mimi.
I
And
love it.
Rebecca's a sister to me and that
Yes,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
That love of community is there. Like Mimi was ready for Rebecca's children if anybody attached them. She don't even know what they look
I'm
like.
gonna call Auntie Mimi up.
Hey,
She's ready to go
pick
to
it up.
war.
I will be there.
But that talks about the
Mhm.
similarities of your communities.
Yeah.
You talk about resilience. You talk about strength of strong women standing in the forefront no matter what circumstances come their way. They're ready to stand up and fight for their children.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing to have. And so as we close, I want to say thank you to all the mothers. Thank you to my mom, my beautiful
Yes.
mother,
Yes.
Minerva
Thank you.
Jean Smith Thomas. I love
Mm.
you. Sometimes I don't say it either. So I love you. I appreciate your strength and your
Yes.
beauty. Why I am standing here in front of everyone because of you.
Yes.
I thank the aunties in my life, my auntie Carlene. I thank the women that paved the way. I thank the women here who are mothers, who sit on the forefront, right? Rolita, who's an amazing mother, Kathy Alstead. So
Mhm.
there's amazing, beautiful women of color here and women,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah.
So not just celebrate for the month of May, giving your mama, auntie, sister some flowers, but
Mhm.
recognize them every day. Give them a
Yes.
hug, give them a
Yeah.
smile.
Yep.
Do something small, get some flowers sometimes. And just, I've been thinking about you, and you are amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to thank again Mimi and Rebecca to have
Thank
this
you
Oh,
for
thank
having
beautiful
us. Yes.
conversation. And I'm going
Uh-huh.
to end this with, please let Mark Brown know that you missed him from this episode so I don't hear the last of it. Thank you guys so much for listening to our podcast.
Happy
Fresh
Mother's
Perspective.
Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.